This session is how to protect your culture during the question mark period of returning to your physical workspace or having some or all of your staff work from home. Interestingly for me, I see news flashes and press announcements and so forth from major corporations saying that the lesson they've learned during the COVID pandemic and the economic shutdown is that from now on, they should have all their workers have the option to work from home. Sounds good, sounds noble. Certainly all of us have learned how to work from home whether we wanted to or not. And in fact, I can tell you that our body of research spanning 20 years' time interestingly shows that maybe something like 1 out of every 5 in most companies could actually thrive on a permanent work from home arrangement. First of all, think about it. Not every job itself is suited to work from home. Certain jobs require physical presence in the workspace. And secondly, when we look at the personality trait-based wiring that you, I, or anybody have, some of us enjoy work from home. Some of us are quite capable in a work from home setting. Some of us can manage ourselves, our activity, and our results well, and others not so much. I'll be the first to tell you I'm not very well suited for work from home. So how would you know what component of your employee workforce are suited to work from home? Well, our studies have shown that the most successful remote work from home employees tend to all share 4 personality traits in common. First of all, they tend to be more collaborative, less authoritarian. Some people enjoy leading, bossing, telling, commanding. That role doesn't suit itself well to independent, solitary work from home. But workers who enjoy a collaborative, service-oriented, oftentimes a team or project-oriented work environment can thrive from a work from home setting. Second personality trait I look for, self-reliance, an ability to perform one's work without physically needing to be next to other workers. So something like serving food at a fast food restaurant where I'm waiting to bag what the kitchen has just cooked doesn't lend itself to work from home. But if the work I perform allows me fully and wholly to execute my work, and I can get my inputs from other workers electronically or via other means, that could lend itself to home-based work pretty well. Third, the type of work performed best in a home environment is often what I call steady work. Work which allows the scheduling or putting in place of routines, having processes that have a certain flow to them. Because if I know the process and the routine, I could easily perform that from home, and I could do it potentially over and over again. So an example of a role that lends itself to work from home that I would call steady would be something like calling from a list in order to, say, set appointments. I start with the letter A, I work to the letter Z, I know how long it takes to make each call. That's steady, routine work. And finally, the fourth personality trait that tends to lend itself well to work from home is any work where it would be necessary for me as the worker to have a high attention to detail, to be able to compare for likenesses and similarities or differences between similar objects, the need to complete form work or enter records or place items in a database or complete spreadsheets. That work lends itself well to home. So if I'm a worker who's collaborative and team-oriented and of service to others, if I can perform my work, doing all my work myself without needing a lot of material immediately from other people, if I'm a person who's steady and enjoys work that can be done in a programmatic, planned, scheduled way, and if I have high attention to detail, I'm probably one of that part of the workforce. I find usually it's somewhere around 20% of most companies' employees that would be well suited to a permanent work from home situation. Now, let's be honest. Just having an office space and going to an office by itself isn't the magic fix. The Gallup polling organization, which has been around for decades and is an industry leader, every 2 years for the past 40 plus years has conducted a cross-sectional survey of American workers, all sorts of companies, all sorts of job roles, all sorts of company sizes. And it's remarkable how consistent the statistic has stayed for a couple of decades as to how many workers who are in an office workspace are what we call engaged. These are the employees that are coming in early, staying late, asking for other work, and essentially meaningfully contributing in an enthusiastic way to the earnings of that organization. And the Gallup organization, across many years of measuring this, has found that number hovers around just less than 1 out of every 3 workers who are in an office setting are truly engaged. So an office alone does not create engaged employees, and I am certainly not anti-work from home. Some studies show that the work from home worker who is suited to work from home actually has higher levels of things like job satisfaction, higher levels of productivity by a rather serious amount. So I'm not proposing that the office by itself engages our workers, but what I can tell you is we stand a chance to disengage even more if we force them to work at home and don't provide an option to get out of that home space, to go see clients, to be with their team physically, to perform work in a collegial, constant atmosphere, and so forth. It's always been striking to me that the Gallup work, which is of very high quality scientifically speaking, says that something like 71% of your and my workers really aren't that engaged. And if they're actively disengaged, those are the workers who are undoing the profitable work of their otherwise engaged counterparts. So leaders of businesses always have to have an eye on the ball as to what would it take to engage more of our employees and not have disengaged employees. And whether that's a work from home or in office setting, I'm going to give you some tips for how you could address that issue. I talk a lot to business leaders, and they'll say things like, boy, I don't know, with this current situation in our society or our business, it seems like our team's morale is really low. Or I'll talk to other leaders who will say, well, in spite of all the problems, I can tell you this, my workers seem really motivated. And I'm thinking, that's interesting, morale, motivation. I wonder if the leaders making those comments actually know the definitions of morale versus motivation. So let me take you through what about 100 years of science says about that. Morale, remember I articulated the leader says it seems like morale's kind of low around here, is important because morale is a long-term phenomenon that really tells us, will my workers stay through thick and thin, through adversity and good times, through low pay and high pay? I need a workforce who will stay, and it's their morale that's going to be a leading indicator of stick and stay. Here's the definition of morale. It's a pattern of thinking. It's an internal form of coaching going on inside the person's brain that constantly evaluates, is all the energy I'm putting into this really worth it? Is it going to pay back somehow? Do I go ahead and make one more dial on the phone this afternoon, even though it's the end of my shift? Do I stay 5 minutes late because the process isn't quite done, or just do I leave now? Well, interestingly enough, the situation may be fairly constant, but different workers will see that equation, effort versus results, either negatively or positively. When the coaching going on inside my own brain says, what the heck, it's not worth it. This will never get any better. There's no use. Why try hard? That's actually low morale. When another worker sees the exact same situation and says, well, that's challenging, but you know what? We've always pulled it through in the past. I've got a good team. I think I can do this. I'm going to stay late. That positive view of the situation is high morale. Low morale versus high morale. Why do we care? Because on your part, to put practices in place that would improve that morale Remember, we had the leader who articulated, it seems like the team's morale is low. Changing that can take as long as 6 months. And it's not changed quickly this afternoon because there was a rah-rah speech or a positivity email or free movie tickets. It takes work to convert employees' own internal self-coaching from negative versus positive about a current situation. Now, the thing about morale that's interesting is it's also highly contagious. A group of workers, somewhat doubtful, somewhat worried, somewhat frightened or having anxiety, who hear another worker articulate a negative piece of self-coaching, themselves get thrown off the cliff, and now all their thinking goes negative. This is particularly true in the case where a group of workers views some vocalization, some communication from their leader as being doubtful, skeptical, feeling like it's not worth it, negative outcomes. That throws the whole team or department off the cliff. So when we place people together remotely or in a workspace, the quality and direction of belief about is our energy going to yield the result needs to be positive. The cure is positive communication. Literally, sometimes we have to teach the employee how to change the framework of their internal coaching from negative to positive. I'll have more tips for this as we progress. So that's morale. We care about it because it's long-term, and we care about it because it's actually an early warning predictor of whether you'll have high turnover. Motivation is different. Motivation is a short-term pattern of behavior on the part of you, me, or an employee, and it can change literally by the hour. It revolves around an internal pattern of thinking, just like morale, but in this case, what I'm thinking is the work that I'm performing now meeting my needs? Each of us, it turns out, has a certain hardwired set of needs that must be fulfilled in the work we do, or literally we feel unfulfilled and we're demotivated by the work. I, for example, might have a need for things to happen very quickly. Low patience, hurry up, come on, where's the stuff, let's go. If you give me the job of a turnpike tollway booth operator, where for 7.5 hours a day, I simply watch the lift arms go up and down, cars go through one at a time, another at a time, that work is going to frustrate my need for things to move quickly. I'm going to be tempted as the worker to actually just raise the gate arm and just wave the traffic through. At least it'll get through quickly. So as we deploy people into jobs, we need to know what do different employees internally, intrinsically need, and try to give them job assignments that provide satisfaction of that need in order to keep their motivation up. Now, again, it's short term. It's hour by hour. I could have been highly motivated first thing this morning about my work, and now it could be late afternoon and I'm tired and I'm just like, I don't want to make one more phone call. I don't want to turn one more gauge on my equipment to punch out one more piece of stuff. I'm not about it. Why? Because by late afternoon, certain needs I have may in fact not have been met, and I may feel demotivated about the work. Now, where morale is highly contagious, motivation is highly noticeable. If you were sitting next to me, or if we were on a Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Skype meeting, you could actually see how motivated I was. Am I smiling? Am I making eye contact? Am I engaged? Am I answering questions? Do I seem to have the outward demeanor suitable for the flow of that conversation that's going on? Well, at that point, I'm showing the behaviors of a motivated person. If I'm disinterested, looking down at my phone, you asked me a question, and I, first of all, didn't even hear the question, and then when I did, I forgot to come off mute, and everybody's like, what is wrong with him? I'm really? Well, at that point, I'm being demotivated, and you notice it. The cure for demotivation is for leadership to put in place work environments, whether in-person or remote, that convey and encourage energy and reassurance. A leader, for example, who shows high energy even in times of stress and strain and anxiety isn't, in other words, beat up and worn out, but seems energized by it. is going to be a more motivation inspiring leader, a leader who seems reassured and confident in hard times also inspires motivation. But imagine if you had a leader who was constantly expressing they were exhausted and vocalized that they were very afraid that we weren't going to be successful. Well, that would demotivate that leader's team. It's inevitable. It'll be almost impossible to stop it from demotivating. So understanding the balance between motivation and morale becomes very important. And I'll give you some tips, some guidance for both. What I really believe in is not anecdotally or through guesswork assuming somebody's level of morale or motivation is. That can really amount almost to stereotyping, to labeling, but rather I'm just a big fan of diagnosing, of using some instrumentation and some skills to go make a measurement of morale or motivation, because then, just like anything else you have to do in business, when you have data, when you have facts, when you know what could happen this way or that way, it gives you an action orientation. So balancing this view of morale and motivation, what do I mean when I say that? And forgive me for taking the negative view of this, but a lot of times when we have an organization, if we have a family unit, we're really interested in, do I have a problem? So let's look at how, as the head of an organization, you might look at morale in the organization to understand if there could be a problem. Why do we care? Because remember, morale is long-term and affects whether people will stick and stay in your organization. I recommend 3 ways you can constantly ping and probe the horizon and see if there might be a morale issue in your organization. Number 1, sites, employment portal sites like Glassdoor, Indeed, and so on, typically have the ability for an employee to put up comments along the lines of what's it like to work here. And unfortunately, sometimes those turn into let's out the company on what a terrible place it is to work or that sort of thing. I strongly recommend that you assign someone in the company to occasionally scan these sites, put in your company name, and see what the commentary is that you find coming up. You can also contact me. I have a bit of an action plan for how you could reverse those negative posts. But for now, at least be scanning periodically to see what the public traffic is about your company. I mean, you could do as simple as a Google search, typing in your company name and scan through enough sites to see if there's any chatter out there that would reveal negative vocalization. Remember that low morale is a negative form of self-coaching. Well, when it goes public, that obviously could be a problem. Another distant early warning signal, see if there's increasing recruiter pressure on your own employees. If employees report that they're being called by headhunters, recruiters, retained search firms, and those representatives, it can mean that your low morale reputation has gone from being private to leaking out publicly. And recruiters are really good these days at internet-based tools that scan for and find commentary of a disgruntled nature, and then, by golly, they're going to come after your people and try to recruit them away on the theory, possibly true, that low morale employees are more susceptible to making a move outside the company. And finally, the result of those first 2 scans showing that activity taking place could in fact be that you're experiencing higher than usual turnover. The Society for Human Resource Management for 70 plus years has constantly computed what the average turnover is, good times and bad, among companies. And the statistic usually ranges in the high teens or low 20s on an annualized basis. If that's been true of your company and all of a sudden you're experiencing high turnover, that could be a sign you have a morale problem. If any of these result in a scan that says, yikes, it looks like we have a problem, reach out and contact me, because I have some strategies for how you can turn that employee morale problem around. Now, motivation we care about, remember, because it's short-term, it changes hour by hour, and it affects productivity. So you might do some scans there as well. First of all, how is the messaging that you see, the traffic between your leaders and the rank and file employees? If the messaging is energized and reassuring, that's going to build motivation among the troops. Occasionally, a note will go out, an email will go from a leader that seems exhausted, tired, and or panicky. Tired and panic will demotivate the troops, so watch your messaging. And then also see if the effect on the troops is one where the employees seem tired or very stressed out or very full of anxiety about the near future. That could be a sign that something has happened, may not be within your control or within the company, but something's happened to that employee or those employees which have demotivated them. It's this balancing of pinging, checking the traffic in morale and motivation that will let you know if it's something that requires action. And if so, we can help. So what would a healthy balance look like? I apologize for taking sort of a negative view there. Well, healthy is an environment where more than 30% of the employees are in fact engaged. Remember that globally, the Gallup organization has found continuously somewhere less than a third of our employees actually being the energized, the positive ones that show up for work and do their job and produce profit for the organization. So if you're better than 1 in 3, you're better than normal. And I congratulate you for that. I can also help with ways you could test engagement and see if in fact you can establish the statistic that tells you where you stand. At any rate, we at Kaiser appreciate your interest, Kaiser community, in the people side of the business. If you'd like, we've got a flyer, How to Return to Business in a Post-COVID-19 World, that has some material suggestions and some resources for you, of course, absolutely free of charge. And we have a way that you can tap us and receive that information. My name's Mikey Maynard. As always, I appreciate being able to hang with the Kaiser community. My email address is on the slide that you see. Feel free to reach out, and we will be all over trying to help you understand how to maintain an energized workforce as you return to work. Thanks, and look forward to hearing from you.